Russian aircraft had also begun to make their presence felt by attacking German targets. German and Russian pilots duelled for control of the skies over the northern sector. The Soviet defensive wall in the northern part of the salient slowed Model's advance to a mere crawl. These delays kept his forces contained within a relatively small area, thus helping the Russians to plan effective countermeasures. But the Russians did not have it all their own way. The Germans fought well. Luftflotte 6 flew countless sorties over the northern part of the battlefield and helped to inflict losses on the ever-increasing number of Russian forces moving into the area. The German troops on the ground moved slowly towards Olkhovatka as the forces of Rokossovsky rushed forward to intercept them. Model's forces managed to take control of Ponry on the left flank and also the town of Teploy on the right flank. These advances represented the furthest points reached in the northern sector by the forces of Model's 9th Army. The Russian defences and weight of numbers presented Model with a barrier that he failed to penetrate. It was now apparent that the forces available to Model were insufficient to smash through the Russian lines. The new Ferdinands had also proved inadequate during the fight. A design flaw had failed to fit the new heavy tank destroyers with any close support machine guns. As they became separated from the supporting infantry and bogged down in the Russian defences, enemy troops were able to close right up alongside them and easily disable them. The Tigers were also not suited to close-quarter fighting, where their superior guns could not be used effectively. Ferocious battles raged over the area as both sides sought an advantage, but none was gained. The area descended into stalemate over the next few days. The total distance covered by Model's 9th Army in the northern sector of the Kursk salient during Citadel was around 12 miles. The capture of Kursk, if achieved, would not be sufficient to defeat the Russian forces in this area. Model's forces were contained in an area that was around 40 miles short of their target. If Kursk were to fall to Hoth's men, a gap of this size would allow the Russians to pour reinforcements into the salient at their will. Powerless to influence the battle any further, Model contented himself with holding on to the areas already captured. The German forces in the north had been stalled. But the real focus of this most historic of battles was in the south. In the southern sector, Hoth's 4th Army enjoyed the largest concentration of tanks under the control of the best divisions in the German order of battle. The 4th of July 1943 saw a different start for Hoth's 4th Panzer Army. Hoth decided to jump ahead of the planned start date of the attack. Aircraft from Luftflotte 4 began the attack on the enemy-held positions, followed by a German artillery barrage. As this barrage lifted, the infantry and tanks moved forward to engage the enemy, and throughout the day, the front line was pushed back in favour of the Germans. The fighting was heavy, and in some areas, the objectives given were not taken until the hours of darkness. This was the first in a series of setbacks for the Russians in the south. These setbacks accumulated steadily over the next few days. The 5th of July began with the 4th Panzer Army in control of the vital high ground. Hoth was keen to get things moving, and he began the next stage of his plan. He ordered a change to the planned route of advance so that the main advance would be moving more to the left. This change was not apparent to Vatutin or Stavka, as Hoth had made his decision without consulting higher command, and therefore Lucy did not pick it up. The German artillery in the southern region was therefore able to deliver its attack first. As this was happening, the Russian Air Force was on its way to attack the German airfields. But the Germans detected their approach and quickly sent their own planes to intercept. An intensive air battle ensued over the southern part of the salient, as the German fighters tore into the Russian formations. At the end of the engagement, the Luftwaffe of Luftflotte 4 was in control of the air. Against this backdrop, the Panthers moved forward. The removal of the aerial threat and the fact that the Russian ground units were expecting a different focus of attack allowed the German tanks to smash through the defensive positions. The Russians realized that they were wrong in their estimates of the disposition of the enemy armored foundations, and that they were about to bear the brunt of the strong enemy forces lined up in front of them. The Germans were using a new tactic based on the new heavy tanks, which was known as a Panzer Kiel, or armoured wedge. This tactic placed the heavier Tigers at the tip of the wedge, with the Panthers forming the outer edges. The weaker Panzer IVs and Panzer IIIs were placed in the centre of the wedge. The Russians were not prepared for the rate of the German advances. Their defensive positions did inflict losses on the Germans, and they held fast in many areas. By the end of the first day, some of the 4th Panzer Army had advanced up to 15 miles. This was more than Model's forces managed in 8 days. It could have been much further, but late changes of orders meant that insufficient time had been left for mine clearance. An enraged General Guderian watched as many of his priceless German Tigers were needlessly destroyed by mines. By the end of the 3rd day's fighting, the Germans had made an advance of around 20 miles. This was beginning to cause concern for the Russians. So much that they ordered the 5th Guards Tank Army and other reserves to be moved from the steppe front and into the area of Prokhorovka. The main defensive sector for the Russians was the town of Oboyan, 35 miles south of Kursk. The Russians had placed strong forces in this area, as they were aware of the importance of holding this town. This was the left flank of Hoth's attack plan. The strength of the defences around this area became clear to the Germans. And Hoth decided to switch the emphasis of his attacks to the east.